I, John, was on the island that is called Patmos. I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and I heard behind me a loud voice. To the angel of the church in Pérgamo write, I know your works, and where you dwell, where Satan's throne is. And you hold fast to my name, and did not deny my faith, even in the days in which Antipas was my faithful martyr, who was killed among you, where Satan dwells.
Today, all that's left of Pergamon are ruins. But when the Apostle John wrote his letter to the church there, it was one of the most influential cities in the Roman Empire.
Pergamum had a unique status that was different than any other city because it was the political center. And it was from there that all of the rulings were made which affected the whole of Asia Minor.
The city's acropolis rivaled Athens, and its library was the second largest in the ancient world, with a collection so great that the Roman general Mark Antony presented it as a wedding gift to Cleopatra.
At the end of the first century, Pergamon was a thriving city. So why does the book of Revelation call it the dwelling place of Satan? The answer lies in the ruins of the city's temples.
On one side, it was a very beautiful city. But on the flip side, it was one of the darkest, eeriest cities in the whole Roman Empire.
The people of Pergamon were known as the Temple Keepers of Asia. The city had 3 temples dedicated to the worship of the Roman emperor, another for the goddess Athena, and the great altar of Zeus, the king of the Greek gods. Many scholars believe this altar is the throne of Satan mentioned in the book of Revelation.
That word throne was first used to describe a chair that was used in a personal private residence. And it was the chair for the Lord of the house, the master of the house. The very fact that Jesus would use that word in this verse means Satan felt at home there. He sat on a throne there. It was his territory. He was the master of that house.
The city also had a healing center called the Asclepion. It was built in honor of the Greek serpent god Asclepios.
In the first century, this was a cross between a hospital and a health spa, where patients could get everything from mud baths to major surgery. Even the emperors came all the way from Rome to be treated here. But this was no ordinary doctor's visit.
If you were a terminal patient, then you were not allowed to go into the Asclepion. And these Asclepian priests didn't want anyone hearing somebody had died in the Asclepion. And in fact, there was a huge sign just above the official entrance to the Asclepion which said, death is not permitted here. So the only way you were going to get in to begin with is if they knew you were going to live.
Patients entered through this underground tunnel. Then they drank a sedative and slept here in the dormitories, while non-poisonous snakes crawled around them all night. They were told that the serpent god Asclepios would speak to them in their dreams and give them a diagnosis.
It was believed that the snakes actually carried the healing power of Asclepios. And if a snake slithered across you while you were sleeping at night, that was a divine sign that healing power was coming to you.
The next morning, the patients told their dreams to the priests, who prescribed their treatments. Finally, the patients made clay sculptures of the body parts that needed healing and offered them to Asclepios.
The people of Pergamon worshipped a myriad of Greek and Roman gods. But when Christianity arrived with the belief in just one God, the city's pagan priests went on the attack, and their most famous victim was a man named Antipas.
In the book of Revelation, Jesus called Antipas my faithful martyr. He was the bishop of Pergamum, ordained by the Apostle John, and his faith got the attention of the priests of Asclepius, who complained to the Roman governor in Pergamum. The priests testified that demons appeared to them in their dreams and told them that the prayers of Antipas were driving them out of the city.
He had cast out so many devils that the demons, the spirits, had been complaining to pagans, You've got to do something about this Antipas.
Antipas was ordered to offer a sacrifice of wine and incense to a statue of the Roman emperor and declare that the emperor was Lord and God. He refused.
If you reject the divinity of the emperor, it's the equivalent of rejecting the city of Rome. And believers were killed for this.
Antipas was sentenced to death on the altar of Zeus.
Most of that altar survives today, and surrounding it are some of the world's most famous marble friezes. They portray the battle between the Greek gods and the giants.
At the top of the altar was a hollow bronze bull, designed for human sacrifice.
They would take the victim, place him inside the bull. They would tie him in such a way that his head would go into the head of the bull. Then light a huge fire under the bull. And as the fire heated the bronze, the person inside the bull would slowly begin to roast to death. And as the victim would begin to moan and would begin to cry out in pain, his cries would go through all of the pipes which were in the head of the bull, so it seemed to make the bull come alive.
Even in the midst of the flames, Antipas died praying for his church.
A few years later, the Apostle John wrote the book of Revelation, mentioning the death of Antipas on this very spot. Here in Pergamon, all that's left is the foundation. Today, the altar of Zeus is more than 1,000 miles away.
In the 19th century, German engineers dismantled the altar and took it to Berlin. The so-called throne of Satan went on display in the city's Pergamon Museum in 1930, just in time to inspire one of the most brutal dictators the world has ever seen. Ancient Pergamon, the center of pagan worship in Asia Minor, once known as the place where Satan dwells. In the 1st century, it was a thriving city. But after countless wars and natural disasters, the temples of Pergamon lay in ruins.
By the mid-19th century, the once great city of Pergamon was barely a memory. The locals were using the site as a quarry, looting the marble for new buildings, until 1864, when a German engineer paid a visit.
Karl Humann was shocked by the destruction of the priceless artifacts, so he got permission to excavate the ancient city himself. And what he found was one of the greatest monuments in history, the altar of Zeus.
Stone by stone, the altar was excavated and brought here to Berlin, and then it was reassembled and placed in its own museum.
The Pergamon Museum was finished in 1930, with the altar as its centerpiece. Eventually, it caught the eye of a young man named Albert Speer, the new chief architect for the Nazi Party. Adolf Hitler had commissioned him to design the parade grounds for the party rallies in Nuremberg. And for inspiration, Speer turned to the Pergamon altar.
Speer gives all the credit to Hitler. I think that he's like a good interior decorator that someone hires, and that client already has the ideas of what he wants to do, and the decorator agrees with him and just fulfills them. So that's what Speer did.
Using the altar as his model, Speer created a colossal grandstand at the rally grounds. It became known as the Zeppelin Tribune. After the war, only a small part of it was left standing.
In the middle of the grandstand, where the altar to Zeus stood in ancient Pergamon, Albert Speer built Hitler's podium. Hitler wanted to create what he called a mass experience, and Speer came up with the perfect idea.
Most of the Nuremberg rallies were held at night, so Speer surrounded the grandstand with 150 searchlights. The columns of light extended for miles in the sky, creating the mystical effect Hitler wanted. The concluding meeting in Nuremberg must be exactly as solemnly and ceremonially performed as a service of the Catholic Church. This effect was known as the Cathedral of Light, and it became a hallmark of Hitler's events. It was even used in the closing ceremonies of the 1936 Olympics in Berlin.
Hitler is very much aware of German mythology, and anytime you look at mythology and gods, you're looking skyward. So I don't think it's an accident that he says to Speer, let's create an environment of looking towards the heavens. And that's what it does.
Inside the rally grounds, thousands of Nazi party members marched in torchlight parades.
These events happen at night, which gives a contrasting effect of fear, of strength, of the unknown, of mystery, and that's all intended by him. He's very theatrical. Torchlight fire has always been part of even pre-Christian beliefs. So I think there's a kind of a quasi-mystical, semi-religious content to these torch parades. There's many of them in Nazi Germany.
From his podium, Hitler mesmerized the crowds. Not every one of you sees me, and I do not see every one of you, but I feel you, and you feel me. Then, under the Cathedral of Light, thousands of Germans swore what they called a holy oath. Blazing flames hold us together into eternity. No one shall take this faith from those who are dedicated to Germany.
From 1933 to 1938, hundreds of thousands of people gathered here every September for the Nazi Party Congress. But it was the 1934 Congress that captured the attention of the world, thanks to what may be the greatest propaganda film of all time.
The 1934 party film is the consummate picture of Hitler. That's it. No other film was ever made of him. And he didn't want any other film made of him. Everything that he wanted people to know about the Nazis is in that film. It was shown continuously for 12 years in Germany.
Triumph of the Will was directed by a young German actress named Leni Riefenstahl.
She was a famous movie star. I would characterize her sort of as a female Indiana Jones. And she was pretty and shapely and popular, romantic films, escapist. Hitler's a bit of a romantic. And so he liked her.
The film portrayed Hitler as a godlike figure, the savior of the German people.
Hitler's entrance in the film is from the sky, as a Messiah would be descending down through the heavens, through the clouds, to the faithful waiting for him below. And anytime he appears, any people that are anywhere near up close to him have these starry-eyed looks in their eyes, glazed looks almost, as if they're in the presence of an unearthly being. That's intentional.
In his speeches, Hitler often borrowed Christian phrases, like in this scene with the Hitler Youth.
After they sing their song devoted to him, Hail Hitler to Thee, which is almost like a religious chant, he goes into his speech and he says things like, you are flesh of our flesh and blood of our blood. Well, he borrows that from the Roman Catholic ritual, with which he's very familiar. It's a very physical statement, and it resonates with that crowd.
Hitler's popularity skyrocketed after the release of Triumph of the Will. The next year, more than 1 million Germans came to Nuremberg to hear his speech. On the evening of September 15, 1935, Hitler announced the Nuremberg Laws, laws that took away German citizenship from Jews.
The law for the protection of German blood and German honor is intended to begin the marginalization process of the Jewish people. Hitler had a lot of popular support for much of his time in office. One doesn't get popular support by saying to the public, we're going to put Jewish people in gas chambers and then incinerate them. You don't do that. What he did was gradually marginalize them.
It was also here that Hitler used the phrase final solution for the first time in public. Bitter complaints have come in from countless places citing the provocative behavior of Jews. This law is an attempt to find a legislative solution. If this attempt fails, it will be necessary to transfer the Jewish problem to the National Socialist Party for a final solution. The Nuremberg laws stripped the Jews of their rights as citizens.
They couldn't teach in public universities. They couldn't practice medicine in public hospitals. They couldn't fly the national flag. Then that was coupled with the Reich citizenship law, which said that Jewish people in Germany were subjects of the Reich, but not citizens.
Hitler's final solution is now known as the Holocaust, from the Greek word that means a holy burnt animal sacrifice. In AD 92, the faithful martyr Antipas died, a holy burnt sacrifice on the altar of Zeus in Pérgamo, the place the book of Revelation calls the throne of Satan. Centuries later in Nuremberg, in the center of a redesigned Pergamon altar, the bronze bull was replaced by a podium. From there, Adolf Hitler announced his final solution to the world. And this time, the burnt sacrifice was 6 million Jews.